Hello and welcome to Never in the Back Foot. Today we are focusing on the recently concluded ODI series between India and South Africa. We'll break down the key moments, standout performances, crucial turning points, and all the matches that kind of defined this series. But that's not all. We'll also be focusing on the review of on the preview of the one-off test that's all scheduled to kick off tomorrow, and something that we are very excited about. We will be talking about the different players, just previewing the squads and all the players to kind of look forward to. On the podcast today, joining me is Mohit Shah. He has been a ardent fan of the women's game and someone who has come on Never in the Back Foot very often. He's a freelance journalist who has been associated with ESPN Cricket Info and Women's Cricket Zone in the past. He's a self-proclaimed cricket vegetable. He loves talking and reading about Olympic sports, kabaddi, and the movies as well. He tweets actively and gives us all the insights we need to know about the women's game. So thank you so much, Mohit, for joining us today, and to all the viewers as well. Please share in your thoughts, comments, and questions in the live chat, and we'll make sure to address it through the course of our discussion. So yeah, Mohit, without further ado, I think we can get started with our discussion. So to just kickstart our discussion, like what were your initial impressions of this tour, which finally seemed to get underway? Because this tour was supposed to happen last year, and it just kept getting delayed and pushed, and finally happening now in this very important World Cup year. So thoughts on the same?
Yeah, I think like they probably wanted to have it closer to the T20 World Cup as well as the ODI World Cup so that they can see how the wickets are, how the venues are playing, and the players can also get an idea of the potential conditions that they might encounter at the World Cup, which would be slightly later, not at the same time. But still, like you at least get an idea of the ground and the pitch, and these girls haven't really played a lot of international cricket in Bangalore before, most of them. So it was a great opportunity for them. And even for the South African team, it's great preparation for a T20 World Cup in Bangladesh because I don't think they have any series scheduled between now and then, as far as I remember. So yeah, I think this is their last series before the T20 World Cup as of now. So it's great preparation for them as well. And all three formats, they don't really play a lot of Test cricket as well. So it was good on the part of BCCI to include one Test as well because that wasn't there in the FTP originally, but they added it after seeing the response for the two tests against England and Australia.
Definitely. I mean, although, the scoreline reads entirely in favor of India, 3-0 in that ODI series, I'm sure South Africa had a lot of positives and takeaways as well. Now, just, dwelling a little in the past, the last time India squared off against South Africa in a bilateral series at home was way back in 2021, where we lost the ODI and the T20 series. Again, it's important to take in the context of how the women were playing after such a long period of time. It was the pandemic and a lot of things were happening. So, Mohit, what were your expectations coming into this series?
Yeah, like apart from say the series against Australia, India have largely been doing really well in this World Cup cycle, especially in ODI cricket, whereas South Africa have been going through a bit of a rebuild, especially after so many of their top players retired. So they've not been that consistent compared to the previous cycle where South Africa were probably the second best team after Australia in the lead up to the ODI World Cup. So I think like India were definitely the favorites, but South Africa are a team that always like tends to play as a team and fight hard. So I thought it would be a good contest, especially because the matches were in Bangalore, which typically has pitches which are batting friendly. So like if you play good cricketing shots, there is value in it, and it's not one of those pitches where it's very difficult to score runs. So anybody who plays proper cricketing shots will always get value for it in a place like Bengaluru.
Certainly, because when I was coming into this series, I had that baggage. Ki, Arey, 2021 series didn't go our way, but I think the teams now are not even comparable. We see so many new, fresh faces, and South Africa themselves have gone through this entire transition. Something we will dwell upon a little later in our conversation, and even more just looking at this from an India point of view. I'm sure Harmanpreet Kaur's captaincy has again come to the forefront. She's quite literally led from the front. So, what have your impressions been of her her captaincy, and finally that lean patch of form that was kind of plaguing her progress has just disappeared.
Yeah, I think it's again changed since the WPL. I think every time she goes into that Mumbai Indians environment, something in her like changes. She also like put in a lot of hard work before that. Like she didn't play the domestic matches, worked with her personal coach, and the results are there to see. And it's great that like even at this age and after so many years of experience, she's willing to put in that hard work, take that time off, and now India is benefiting because of that. And like you said, like at least as far as her batting is concerned, she was quite close to flawless. Like you rightly said, she led by example, came out in a couple of difficult situations to bat and played really well and took the team almost past the finishing line or got them to a total that was well above par. So from a batting perspective, like you said, she's very key for India because nobody else has the ability that she does in the middle order, which is to play through the innings, get those big hundreds, get those big scores, guide the younger players. She also mostly tends to run well between the wickets and things of that sort. She is a good fielder as well. So for somebody who's like that old, she still is remarkably fit. And clearly she's also forming a good understanding now with Amol Muzumdar, who's been there for more than 6 months. So it seems like they are building towards something special, and the results also have been good. Like India have now won 8 matches on the trot across formats, which we've not seen happen too often, at least in the last 4 5 years. So yeah, all good signs.
Definitely. I think the kind of synergy we see, between the captain and coach is quite refreshing after that whole troublesome Ramesh Powar phase that, we kind of had to encounter. But looking at the vice captain, who's not far behind, we have Smriti Mandana, in her purple patch, notching two scores of 100 and, that one score of 90 in this series. Again, what were your takeaways from her performances? She's coming from a great, vein of form, so to say, because with the in the WPL, with RCB, she's been so successful. In the Bangladesh series, we could see her get back to that groove, and this series just kind of elevated her performances.
Yeah, I think you just need to get her in Bengaluru to get the best out of her because prior to the WPL, her form wasn't great, but then she was a completely transformed player in the WPL. And like you rightly pointed out, like this series is easily the best she has ever batted in India, at least. Like never before has she been this prolific or this consistent in India. Abroad, we've seen her do it many times in England, in Australia, even in South Africa to an extent. But to see her do so well in India was really good. And the other pleasing thing was her converting those 50s into hundreds because that's long been a problem area for her. And the sad thing is, she doesn't really get out to good deliveries after getting 50s. It's mostly trying to be over ambitious or just getting carried away and things of that sort. So this time it was good to see her get those three figures and not just get three figures, but even after that, like push on. Like she got 136, I think, in one game, which was very good. Once she got out in the 90s, but I think we can let that go. When you get 200s in 190, that's technically as good as it gets. Like if you ask her, she probably would have wanted three on the trot because nobody's ever done that in Indian women's cricket. But still, like this was as good as it gets. She even turned her arm over. We'll get to it, I think, later when we talk of the bowling. But yeah, I think this was probably one of her best series ever.
Absolutely, because she really seemed to be in that good mental space, just raking runs up like all Indian fans have long wanted her for. In consistency, I think that is something which was also very noteworthy, and all of those match performances came with an impact, right? You could see how it directly had a impact on India's match outcome and how India ended up on the winning side. So in that sense, I wouldn't be complaining if the third score of 90 didn't convert to become a massive 100. But also, Mohit, we've looked at these positives. Let's also look at Shefali Verma's form, right? Now, in the ODI format, she has had a tough vein of form, unable to, just get going here. Again, the sample size we're looking at is very small because India has played very few ODIs since last year and, like, just this year as well. Even in the ICC Women's Championship table, I think we've played like the least number of ODIs, in comparison to other nations. So, do you think it's too early to just keep judging Shefali Verma for her form, things not working out well, and replacements also? It's too early to have this conversation.
Not really. It's not too early because now today is incidentally like 3 years to the time she made her ODI debut for India.
Mm.
And 3 years is quite a long time. Like, I get the point that she's not always been a fixture in the 11. A lot of times she has been dropped midway through tournaments and things of that sort. But overall, on the whole, when you look at it now, she's somebody who's played almost 100 games for India across formats. So she might be a 20-year-old, but there's a lot of experience there. And when you compare her to a fellow 20, 21-year-old like Richa Ghosh, are we seeing the kind of progress in her that we are seeing in somebody like Richa? And she's getting a great position to bat at. Like, whenever she's played for India, she has only opened. So at least that consistency is there. It's not like somebody like Richa Ghosh or Harleen Deol or even Yastika Bhatia who keep having to shuffle up and down the order, which is never easy to do. When it comes to Shafali, she has a clear role, she has a clear position. Maybe she hasn't gotten all three games in a lot of series, but in this series, she even got that. So her performances have definitely been very underwhelming. Also, like, her whole attitude, like her fielding hasn't improved, and these are the things that you want to see. Like, form with the bat is okay, that can change. You can have a tough series or two, and if the player is very talented, you still persist with them. Like, when Smriti first came on the scene, there were periods where she went through lean scores, but because of her potential, like, India stuck with her. Now the case is different because there are a lot of players in the wings who are doing well in the openers position. There's Priya Punya, there's Shweta Sehrawat, just two who are doing really well on the domestic circuit, have been doing well for a few years now. There's S. Meghna too, who did really well in the one series she played for India. So it's also about being fair to the other players. And all said and done, like, Shafali's now played 20, 25 ODIs and not gotten a single 100. That is still okay. Like, for a young player, getting those three figures is not always easy. But she's also averaging only just about 20, 22, and that just isn't good enough in the current Indian team, considering the kind of talent we have. I personally feel like she's a good talent and somebody who should figure into the selection equation, but maybe she's better suited batting lower down, especially in ODIs, because I don't feel she has the tightness that is required to, like, survive the power play, especially on pitches where the ball is moving. She can open in T20Is because there, like, the ball doesn't move for more than 2 or 3 overs, and that too is not always the case. And she's done relatively well in T20Is. So I think she can open in T20Is. But in ODIs, India should probably consider another opener.
Definitely, that is the food for thought. And even with the way the Indian team is going right now, you see a lot of experimentation, right? Looking at the next aspect of Dialan Hemlata, she was slotted in at that number 3 spot. So, what do you think was the rationale and the mindset there? Do you think it was perhaps the right move to, bring her there? Because I think a lot of fans, including me, were championing the cause of, having Jemima come in at number 3. But then with Hemlata coming in there, were you entirely convinced that this is the right way to go?
I think, like, India's preferred number three largely through this World Cup cycle has been Yastika Bhatia because she was out injured for this series. India just wanted to look at more options. Like, the last series, they looked at Richa Ghosh, who did pretty well. But then what she can do down the order, there are not too many who can do that. So India might have thought that. And Dayalan Hemlata did pretty well at number three in the T20Is versus Bangladesh. So there must have been that temptation to give her a go in ODIs as well in that position. So I get the reasoning behind it, but I'm not sure if she can be on number three in the ODI format because she doesn't really have that much of a range against pace bowling. And against the good bowling sides, you would be facing a lot of pace if you're batting at number three. So maybe she is better suited to batting slightly lower down the order at number 5 or 6, where she mostly has batted even for railways in the domestic circuit. So I think probably like India, and then she can probably bowl a lot more too, though even at three, she can still bowl. Like, I don't see her batting position having to do anything with her bowling. But I don't think like number three is the right place for her, especially in ODI cricket, because like she doesn't have that range of shots against pace which is required for a number three batter in international cricket.
That's true. I think in the larger scheme of things, we will see the Indian team kind of experiment a lot more because we had, someone like a Priya Punya also, tested in this similar position. I think it was the third ODI where we saw her and we got a good glimpse of, the kind of capabilities she possesses because she primarily plays as an opener, but coming in at number three, we saw her strike a few here and there. But did that give you enough confidence of her abilities to kind of nail the spot? Or again, as you rightly said, because Yastika is not there, India is just experimenting a lot. This was again just a stopgap arrangement.
Yeah, it was a stopgap arrangement because I think if Priya Punya has to be in the Indian team, it can only be as opener because she has like a very traditional game. She's technically sound and she usually likes to start slow and then accelerate. Even in this match, she played well, but I think her strike rate was somewhere around the 70 mark, if I'm not wrong. So I feel like she's a good batter. She's technically sound, but ideally you want somebody at number three who can take the game on right from the beginning. Like if you look at somebody like Australia or even England, they have very aggressive players at number three, which is also like a big reason why they do as well as they do. Because it's okay to have one slightly conservative opener if the other opener is very aggressive. So Priya Punya can be a good opening partner for Smriti Mandana. I think she can definitely be tried out in the opener's role, but I wouldn't really think she's the best option for number three. Like somebody like Yastika Bhatia or even Jemima, who are like a lot more attack minded and can rotate the strike more freely, are more suited to that number three position.
Absolutely. And I was actually just getting to the point of Jemima because I also personally believe, very strongly believe that, she could be that ideal number three India has wanted for far too long. Yet, you could see the team management's insistence to, just play her at number five. And that seems to be the thing. So even at number five, we saw very lukewarm performances. I mean, coming from the WPL, there were expectations she will do well. Missed out the Bangladesh series because of an injury. So what did you make of this, Mohit? Do you still think she can, stake a claim for that number three spot, or will the management continue to play her in that number five spot?
Looking at the management, I think it's pretty clear that they want her to play at number five. And that's okay because like she's had success in that role. She played a good innings against Australia, even against Bangladesh. She did really well. So I can see why they want her to bat at number five. So I don't think they will be changing her position. And I think she did okay. Like one match she didn't get to bat, one match she got out early, but in the third match she stayed not out and finished the game for India, which is what her role is if she's batting at number five. So I think like she's done really well ever since her ODI comeback, and maybe that is why, and it's largely been in that number five role. So the management thinks it's best to stick with her in that position. Like you said, I also think she's too good a player to be batting that low. Like I'd much rather see her even open because she's good enough to do that, or if not that, bat at three. But I think clearly the management want to see her bat at five and play the finisher's role, maybe because she is now somebody who has a lot of international experience. So maybe they need somebody to like be there in case both Harman and Smriti get out early, which is not a luxury you have if you bat all three of them in the top four. So that could potentially be the logic behind having her at five. And it's so far been okay, but for that they need a good number three. So if they find a good number three, then Jemima being at five is okay.
Yeah, I think this argument also kind of makes sense, but a lot hinges on, as you rightly said, finding that ideal number three. And once Yastika, comes back from her injury, I think we'll get a fair assessment of, where things are headed. And talking about experimentations at number three, we had Richa Ghosh too, right? Now, she was also tried in that number three slot, had a great series versus Australia. But again, that experiment was short lived as she's back, in her designated number six spot. So, what have you made of her presence in that batting order? And you're convinced, right? She is that premier finisher that India needs at number six.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that is the right position for her, and that is the only position where she should bat largely. Obviously, one off game you can experiment and stuff, but that should be her role in the ODI World Cup because she's like arguably one of the best finishers in the world. Definitely the best in Indian cricket, but also one of the best in the world. So there's like barely two or three players in world cricket who can do what she does. So India is really fortunate to have somebody of her skill set who's also like improving all the time. So it's best to not tinker with that again, and let her just be in that role and give her that clarity and freedom that this is what you'll be doing and this is what you'll do all the way till the World Cup.
Agreed. And, also just looking at Deepthi Sharma now, she was one of the highest wicket takers in this ODI series. She quite diligently performed her job, went under the radar because we were also fixated on Smriti Mandana and her golden performance. So, thoughts on Deepthi Sharma? And again, there was a lot of contention on her batting spot, but I think somewhere that 7 8 seems ideal for her.
Yeah, I don't think we should get into that anymore because we've discussed it enough times and she didn't really bat in this series as such apart from that one innings, and there she did really well. Like you said, like India lost 4 5 wickets early and then she came and stabilized and formed that partnership with Smriti. So she played her role to perfection in this series. Like you said, she was very diligent both with bat and ball. In the field also she got a run out. So she did her role to perfection. Like for somebody who's so experienced, who's been at the international level for 10 years, you expect them to know their role and do it properly. And that is what she did. And like you said, flew a little bit under the radar, but also got a player of the match award. So it's fine. Like she got acknowledged duly as well, considering like she didn't really have any blockbuster performance, but she did her job very well, like you said. So yeah, she is again like one of those solid performers, especially with the ball. So like Harman also said, like she's her go-to bowler and somebody who she knows will get the job done. So yeah, like with Deepthi, this has largely been the case in the past couple of years. So this series was merely a continuation of that.
Absolutely. I mean, awarded MVP at the WPL, we see her, still continue picking wickets and being a very important cog in India's beat, getting those crucial breakthroughs. And just adding on to this whole discussion about our bowlers, we had Asha Shobna, who made her elusive ODI debut. She was fantastic with returns in that first ODI as well. So, are you happy to see her domestic and WPL performances kind of translating internationally as well? And great to see her story as well, right? The way she's just evolved.
Yeah, absolutely. Very happy because she's like easily the best leg spinner in India and should have been in the Indian team earlier. But finally, that she is now that she's there, she's like consistently put up performances in most of the games that she's played for India. Like you said, in the first match, she had that great ODI debut. So she's definitely somebody who should be getting a lot more opportunities because she clearly has what it takes to succeed at the international level. And once you see that potential and ability, you should just be backing that irrespective of age, especially when you're so close to a World Cup. So I think she's somebody who's like firmly thrown her name in the mix with solid performances and shown that it's something that she can replicate at the international level as well.
Definitely. And fingers crossed we get to see a lot more of her because the moment, Indian cricketers touch age 30, there's like a, clock that's ticking. So hopefully, she gets a lot more opportunities. And even just talking about debuts, right? We had Radha Yadav who made her ODI debut in this series. Again, performed very well. So what are your thoughts on her performances? And going ahead too, does she warrant a place in the squad? Like, do you see her in the ODI scheme of things? Or again, was it just like, experimenting and just testing our bench strength?
I think like they've been trying to look for a left arm spinner ever since they've dropped Rajeshwari Gaikwad. They went to Saika Ishaq first, then they went to Mannat Kashyap. Both of them only got one game each, so that's never fair. But like in that one game itself, it looked like they didn't probably have what it takes because they were very expensive. But then again, that was against Australia. So
Oh yeah.
most players would find that to be a tough debut. So clearly then the selectors thought why not go with Radha because she was really good in the series versus Bangladesh, somebody who's played lots of international cricket in the T20I format, obviously, so has a lot of experience. But I don't think she has what it takes to succeed in the ODI format as of now. Like it was good that they gave her the opportunity because she's done really well at the domestic level, did well in the T20I series as well. But I'd any day put somebody like a Rajeshwari Gaikwad over her when it comes to the 50 over format because I feel like you need a spinner who can take wickets in the middle overs, and that really is not Radha Yadav's strength. What she's good at is like stemming the run flow, not giving a lot of runs away. But in this series, She bowled tidily, like she didn't bowl badly at all, but she didn't even do anything exceptional. But most importantly, like she didn't pick any wickets, and that is what you need in a spinner. So I feel like somebody like Rajeshwari Gaikwad or even Sneh Rana is like much more suited to that role. And I think like Radha brings a little bit with the fielding, and that is also probably why they picked her over Saika. But as such, I don't really see anything in her bowling that tells me that she'll be like a major success in the 50 over format as of now. I think she needs to work a little bit on her pace and also on her lengths. If she does those things, then maybe a few months or years down the line, she can succeed in the 50 over format as well. But as of now, I'm not really convinced that she is India's best left arm spinner for the longer formats.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, seeing Saika Ishak, just warm the benches was a sight to the was a very a difficult sight to see, definitely. And even with Rajeshwari Gaikwad, I think she would she's being now looked at more as an option in the red ball format, and even Manat Kashyap not getting enough opportunities is quite unfortunate. And even Sneh Rana, right, just getting overlooked for this ODI series, and I think even the T20 leg was just bizarre. But I think that'll take us to another entire tangent of discussion. But even looking at the other debutant from the series, we have Arundhati Reddy, right? She finally got the opportunity to don the India Blues in this format and look really good, right? So, what did you think of again? Her domestic performances translating to great international performances. Was the opening bowler with Pooja Vastrakar from the other end, and impressed with her vein of form?
I think we need to see more. Like the first match, she started well. We know she's capable of bowling well with the new ball. She gets good in swing. Her lengths are generally good. But like she went for quite a few with the old ball in the first match she played. Came back really well though in the final ODI where she bowled very well, got the key wicket of Laura Wolfart. So she's somebody who needs more time at the international level because at the domestic level, she was playing for Railways for the longest time. So she was only bowling with the new ball for 4 5 overs and then not really getting much of an opportunity to bowl. This year, she switched to Kerala where she got to bowl a lot more, but still, it's just one season. So she's somebody who needs a lot more overs at the international level. But overall, I feel like she's somebody who can bring a lot to the Indian team because she's a very good fielder. She has ability with the bat. She can be a Pooja Vastrakar sort of player. So she's a good backup for somebody like Pooja Vastrakar, I would say.
Definitely. And I think lately she's also been training with the Nice Academy and Shriyanka's coach as well. So, you see some promise there and hopefully, honing of her skills and talent. And talking about a like for like replacement, of course, you have someone like Pooja Vastrakar as well, who performed, I think, well, in the series. She was India's opening bowler with Arundhati Reddy. And in the absence of Renuka Singh Thakur, quite, admirably held up that pace attack. So, what have you made of her evolution so far and the way she's adapted to this role, right? We've seen Pooja Vastrakar was earmarked for success, the next big all rounder for India in like across all formats, but injuries have kind of plagued her. But how convinced have you been with her performances this series?
I think like her problem again is similar to Shafali's. Like she's somebody who's now played more than 100 times for India across formats. You were talking about impact for somebody like Smriti. For somebody like Pooja, with her experience, with her skill set, she should be having a lot more impact. She still like bowls way too many loose deliveries for my liking, which is definitely not what you want in your pace spearhead. For the longest time, like India had Jhulan Goswami as the pace spearhead, so our expectations are very high. So when it comes to like Indian pace bowling or even like the bowling spearhead, like somebody like Deepti, I would say is the spearhead because she like bowls really tightly, leads the attack. For Pooja, she is not even a regular 10 over bowler yet. And on the days when she does bowl 10 overs, sometimes she can be very expensive. So I don't really feel like she has done justice to her ability so far. But like you said, there aren't too many players in India who can do what she does when you take the whole package together. So because of that, like she definitely is a sure presence in the India squad and maybe even a sure starter. But if like Arundhati Reddy keeps up what she showed us in that final ODI, it will inevitably force Pooja also to up her game, because I feel like somebody like Renuka is a sure starter when fit in the India ODI 11. So that would then like be a good competition for places. We have Geeta Sadhu also, who was not a part of this series, but whenever she's played at the international level, she's generally done very well. So it's time for Pooja Vastrakar to now like start putting in more consistent displays instead of doing something miraculous once every 10-15 games.
Yeah, definitely. You don't want to be, a flash in the pan sort of player and just kind of be more consistent. And talking about our pace spearhead, Renuka Singh Thakur, who was, undoubtedly fantastic in that first ODI. I think that dismissal of Laura Wolfart will live rent free in all our heads. But just unavailable, rested or injured, unclear in the remaining two ODIs. And what your observations on her performance? And sometimes, do you think her being that frontline pacer, especially because there's a huge vacuum of, Julan Goswami's absence. So sometimes do you think that puts a lot of pressure on her, and that's why the management is, just trying to have this conscious effort of, managing her workload?
And yeah, like you were saying about Pooja, she's also somebody who's had her fair share of injury struggles, especially since coming into the Indian team. So I'm pretty sure her workload is being managed, because, like Pooja, she's probably the only pacer who's regularly playing all three formats for India. So it makes sense also to manage her workload. So I'm okay with her workload being managed, but yeah, like she clearly has been the standout pacer for India ever since the last ODI World Cup ended, and she hasn't really done much wrong in ODIs. And like you said, again, like in that first ODI, also she was very good, especially the ball that got Laura Wolfart out would have gotten most batters out. And that is what she's really good at, like getting the best batters out, bowling these almost unplayable deliveries. And ODI is her best format. Like that is where she's been the most consistent since her debut. So I feel like she's somebody who just needs to work on her fitness and conditioning. And once she does that, and it's good that the Indian team is also working on it and trying to manage her workload and all of that. But yeah, like that's the only area she needs to work at primarily. There are other smaller things, but if her fitness falls into place, then the rest will follow.
Yeah, definitely. And she's too good a player, to sit aside or be rested because I think we've seen her, deliver those consistent performances. I know the WPL is again not a good indication of that. A lot of RCB fans will disagree with me, but at least internationally we've seen, great performances, and she's the pace attack spearhead. So, we need her to step up more often. And although, Mohit, through our discussion, we have largely focused on the positives and things that have really worked well for India. Do you still think there are areas of concern or areas that actually need to be addressed for India in the ODI format?
Yeah, there are like two or three areas which are probably the biggest concerns. I'd say like the batting still tends to rely quite a lot on Smriti and Harmanpreet. So that is something that probably like this series, both of them were getting a lot of runs. So the lower order didn't really get tested all that much. But on days where both of them don't score runs, you want to see India win those matches as well. So that is like one area where like the other players need to step up more often. This series they didn't have that opportunity because every match one of these two was performing, if not both. But yeah, that is one area where you would want to see improvement. The other area is strike rotation. Like India are very good at hitting boundaries. I don't think boundary hitting is a problem for them, but like the strike rotation is something that I still feel can be a lot better, especially in the power play and middle overs. So that is like one area where they should be still working. Like, and I think that also sometimes has a lot to do with fitness. So just running hard, converting ones into twos, twos into threes. Like you just have to look at somebody like Australia to see how they do it. So that is mostly a byproduct of fitness. So that is one area where they need to work at. And lastly, I think the bowling attack, I still don't feel like all the pieces have fallen into place. That also has to do with selection. But I feel like, yeah, like if you score 325 and the match is going to the final over, like it means that there is a lot of scope for improvement. So, yeah, like the bowling, I feel is something that still needs a lot of work, mostly in terms of getting the right mix, and for players like Pooja Vastrakar to find more consistency. Because now, like you said, she's somebody who's the most experienced in this Indian pace lineup, has been playing international cricket for a good 5-6 years. So you want to see that experience reflect in the performances.
Certainly. And I hope, the think tank and the management is kind of, working on these issues. And I think one of the biggest positives is we're just playing so many series, right? Bilaterals ahead of this World Cup. That's the T20 World Cup and the ODI World Cup that's happening in India in 2025. But Mohit, how well do you think that India is shaping up ahead? Because right now we see a lot of, pieces falling in place, but not entirely. The whole picture is still something that is being worked on. But what do you reckon are India's chances in this World Cup? Or do you again think this is too early to be having this discussion and we really have to see how the rest of the year progresses?
For the ODI World Cup,
Yeah.
yeah, for the ODI World Cup, I feel like once we go to Australia for that away tour towards the end of this year, after that we'll get a better idea. But as of now, they've done really well. Like if they don't make the semis, it would be a huge surprise because they've by far been the second best team, if not the best team in this World Cup cycle in the ODI format. I would say second best because they lost 3-0 to Australia, and that clearly like says that Australia at least are ahead of them. But yeah, apart from that, like they've beaten every other team, like clean swept every other team other than Bangladesh, which I think is quite commendable because the England series was away, the Sri Lanka series was away, even the Bangladesh series was away. This was in fact their first home series in this cycle, or second maybe. First actually, because all the previous
First,
three
yeah.
were away. So yeah, it was their first series at home. So yeah, I think they're shaping up really well. Like typically, generally, whenever they play in India, they play better than when they are playing, say, in England or Australia, especially. So it's good to see them. Like there are still a few areas like that opening partner for Smriti, the number three, the correct spin attack apart from Deepti, who their frontline pacer is. So there are these pegs which need to fall into place, but there's still a year. But ideally, you'd want all of this to be sorted at least 6 months before the World Cup. So thankfully, like you said, they've only played 12 ODIs, so there are still 12 ODIs left. Plus, I'm sure BCCI will hopefully schedule another couple of series or so before the World Cup. So they should be playing around 15. So like I don't think they could have been in a much better position than this 1 year or a little more than that out from the World Cup. Just that they now need to find a way to beat Australia.
Yes, we eventually, circle down to this one competitor. We have Australia and their hegemony in women's cricket, just, winning ICC trophies like that. But hopefully, India can present a formidable challenge to them because, of course, it's a home World Cup and, something that we can, pride ourselves in giving a good fight. But hopefully, it just doesn't end there and ends with us on the winning side. But enough about India, and let's talk about this from a South Africa point of view as well, because I think it was a rather forgettable series for South Africa and something they would want to move on from. A lot of things did not work out well. You could see how their batting was falling apart, bowling was not quite delivering, the fielding was, somewhere in between. So, your thoughts, Mohit, on South Africa's performance in the series?
No, I think you summed it up pretty well. So it would mostly be a reiteration only. Like, but I think like the main thing to focus on out of the things you said was the fielding because that is something that typically South Africa prides itself on. But like this series, it wasn't up to the mark. And the unfortunate thing for them was they dropped India's best players like Smriti and Herman, and they invariably make you pay. So, like the fielding was a big difference between the two sides in this series, and the ultimate scoreline reflected that because they had some good bowling displays, some good batting displays, but the fielding was largely very abysmal from South Africa, especially the catching more than the ground fielding, and I think that like cost them a fair bit.
Certainly, and just not at looking at this ODI series, I think at large also, the kind of losses they had versus Australia versus Sri Lanka, I think has set them back a little because we understand they're going through this whole transition phase, and we have a new captain, who's kind of just finding her feet as well. But what do you think is the way ahead for South Africa? Do you somewhere think they should just trust the process and keep going at it? The results will go here and there, but just keep fighting till the end.
Yeah, I think that is what it is for them because, like you rightly said, like they are going to through a transition phase, and they are one of the few teams who actually like do most things well. Like they pick the right squad, they play players in the right position. So there's not much more that they can do than this. Like their younger players need more experience at the international level. The only thing that they probably can ask for is for their more experienced players to step up. So somebody like Suneli's needs to give them more runs because she's now a veteran. Like her age might not be a lot, but she's been playing international cricket for donkey's years. Tasman Brits again like didn't have a great series, but she's largely done well for them, especially in the ODI format. So that caused them in this series because she's again somebody who gives them a lot of runs, but that didn't happen in this series. So like they just need these senior players to step up and carry the younger players along because the talent is there. They made the last T20 World Cup final with a largely similar squad. Like obviously Shabnam Ismail was still there and Chloe Tryon was there. So like this series also, like Chloe Tryon not being there was a big miss for them because she has had good success against India in the past. She is somebody who can do really well in Indian conditions, both with bat and ball. So Chloe Tryon was again a big miss for them, but otherwise, like largely, I think like Laura Wolfart is a very good leader. Like her performance with the bat is always up there. Even in the field, you can see like you said, she's new, so she's learning. So there will be mistakes, but her intent and the thought process is always right. Like she does work really hard. She tries to talk to her players, respects them. They also respect her. So there's not much more that you can ask for in a leader. So it's a team that does most things right. Like the only thing they wouldn't want is like their fielding and things of these sort to come in the way because those are controllables. The experience at international stage will come, but these small things like fielding and yeah, just like being showing a little more tactical awareness is what will like help them because like their results are okay, like they are 50-50ish at this point of time, but it's a good team. Like it's a team that can easily make the semis in next year's World Cup.
Definitely. And I think writing off South Africa would be very stupid on our parts because even this series, right, we saw them put in some commendable performances, but I think India was just better. And, dwelling on some of the points you brought in, like talking about Annika Bosch, Tasman Brits, and Sunelise, right, they've just been woefully out of form. Somewhere, they've just pretty much lost the rhythm. So that must have, that did hurt South Africa and their prospects through this series. And just dwelling on this positive of Marizan Cup right now, she not bowling is of course a big loss to South Africa, but her batting still makes her a very valuable prospect, right, to the team. So, what were your thoughts on Marizan Cup's performance? And fingers crossed to see her bowl very soon.
Yeah, like Laura Wolfart said in the presser today that she's not yet ready to bowl, but they are continuously monitoring her progress. But I think with the T20 World Cup being so close, it's best to not take any risks because you need her for that tournament more than any bilateral series. So it's okay if she doesn't bowl because she's somebody who makes the 11 easily on the basis of her batting alone. Like she's probably the best batter in that team along with Laura Wolfart, and she's been supremely consistent with the bat as well in all three formats. So I feel like she again did her job pretty well. Like that innings that she played in the second ODI is one of the best innings ever that anybody has played in an ODI in India. Like I've not seen too many innings better than that, and it was a chanceless innings. There were no drop catches, no missed opportunities, nothing. And that is what you get with Marizan Kaap. She's like a thorough professional, somebody who knows what is required and just goes out there and gets the job done. And I think like she didn't really have the desired impact in the other two ODIs, so she'll be raring to go for this test match.
Definitely excited to see her and the magic she weaves, because in tests we've often see her that coming from her. And briefly, just looking at South Africa's bowling as well, right? We saw glimpses of good showings, right? From we had Nadine de Klerk who came back later, then we had Masa Bataclas, then you had Tumi Sekukune, and even Ayabonga Khaka, right? They were bowling well, but somewhere they could not really challenge the Indian batters enough, especially I think in those first and second ODIs where they were able to, restrict India's run flow, but somewhere they just threw it away, right? What were your takeaways from their bowling performances across those three ODIs? And again, just looking at the spin department as well, it's heavily dependent on Laba to deliver, right? So again, do you think it's somewhere becoming a trend for them to depend on these players to get them those crucial breakthroughs?
Yeah, I think every team, apart from say Australia, will have like two or three bowlers that they would primarily rely on for breakthroughs. I think the problem for South Africa in this series was with ever since Shabnim Ismail is retired, like Marizan Kaap has been their main bowler, especially in the power play, and she was also not bowling. So like they didn't have two of their greatest bowlers ever. So that like takes away a lot of the wicket taking threat. And like you mentioned, the spin has been a big problem for them. Like Malaba has done okayish, but ever since Dane van Niekerk has retired, like that is they've never really been able to replace her either with the bat or with the ball. And I think that has really caused them because like teams have identified that as a big weakness in the South African lineup. Like they have four good bowlers, like you said, there's Marizanka, Payabonga Khaka, Malaba, and maybe Masabata Class or Sekou Pune, whoever plays. Like they largely bowl well. There's Nadine D. Clerk also, who's like a pretty good all rounder, very handy. But the fifth bowler was a big weakness for them in this series because the second spinner was Nondomisu Shangase, who's not played a lot overall in international cricket and not in India, especially. And the Indian batters were very smart. They recognized that most of them play spin really well. So they took full toll of that. And that fifth bowler routinely like went for 70, 80, or even 100 odd runs in the second ODI. So once like one of your bowlers goes for that many runs and the others aren't picking wickets, like the Indian batters were very smart, but the good bowlers, they were just playing them out. Somebody like Khaka. And then when the weaker bowlers came along, they were taking those risks and going for the big shots. So that shows improvement on the part of India as well because they've not always had this kind of tactical awareness. But that is what they showed this time. And they like targeted the weaknesses well in the South African lineup.
Certainly, and I think somewhere South Africa will remember these outcomes and hopefully try to enforce the right changes, because this is not the kind of result you'd want to see, and they would want to make a strong comeback. My next question to you is going to be, what are some of the positives that South Africa can take? But I think the question is pretty simple, right? I mean, of course, Marizan Kaap, you have Laura Wolfart, but more any other positives that South Africa can take? Because areas to work out, there's definitely a lot of areas they need to work on. But any positives that they can take going ahead to that one-off test?
I think the only other major positive was probably somebody like Nonkuleko Malaba because she's still pretty inexperienced in the ODI format. And like you said, there was a lot of pressure on her because she was the lead spinner. And when you're playing any format in India, the pressure is always on the spinner to get the wickets, especially if somebody like Marizan Kaap's also not bowling. And I think she bowled really well even to the likes of Smriti, Harman, who are like the best players in the Indian team. She largely put them under pressure. They also respected her bowling. So I think her growth is one big positive for South Africa. I think they need to find somebody who can complement her well in the middle overs and provide that wicket taking threat. Because in India, you will need two spinners. You can't get by with just one quality spinner if you want to win a major championship. That is like the one big area where South Africa need to find somebody before the next ODI World Cup.
Yeah, I mean, South Africa does have their task cut out, and hopefully, they can figure it out, because again, they're too good a side, yeah, matlab, to have these kind of performances. And Laura Wolfart too, right? Young captain, so she definitely, want to get those good performances coming up also very soon. And let's move on to the next segment of our discussion, where we'll just quickly preview the test match. So Mohit, how excited are you for this test? Because it's happening in Chennai. There's just so much to kind of look forward to, and Chennai is one of your better venues in India to watch a test match. You can see fierce competition and everything. So all around, I read this discourse that it's going to be a cakewalk for India. Test match, we have supremacy and everything. But do you think South Africa will turn up and actually make a contest out of it?
I think when you play international cricket, there is no option but to turn up and give it your best shot. But sometimes, like you tend to get outplayed, which is what happened when they played Australia earlier this year. So And considering India was so dominant against both England and Australia in home conditions, and like you said, this match is happening in Chennai, so there will be a fair bit of turn, maybe even from day one. So again, like you said, like we were talking about the positives, I think the big key for South Africa in this test would be Laura Wolfart and Marizan Kaap. If the two of them are able to get a lot of time in the middle, if one of them gets a 150 or so, that probably is South Africa's best chance of pushing India hard. Because if Marizan's not bowling, I don't really see them taking 20 Indian wickets. But because this is a 4-day test, they can maybe aim for a draw, because this Indian team just has too much depth both in the batting and bowling department. So I think India are the overwhelming favorites, but there is some very good individual quality in the South African team which can challenge the Indians.
Certainly, and I think the last time India and South Africa squared off in a test was that iconic 2014 test, which happened in Mysore, where Harmanpreet Kaur took 9 wickets and India won by a massive margin by an innings or so. So, do you have memories of that match, Mohit? Because I remember pictures and everything, and I remember how special this test match was. But do you also have memories?
Yeah, memories meaning will last largely be through the scorecards only, because as far as I remember, I don't think the match was televised. So, but yeah, like India were very dominant in that match. Like Mignon Dupria got a good 100. She played a great innings. But apart from that, there wasn't much to cheer for South Africa. But from an Indian standpoint, there were a lot of great performances. Uh, Poonam Raut got a very good 100. Harmanpreet took 9 wickets, like you mentioned. I think Thirush Kamini also played a very good innings. So I think South Africa got outplayed in that match. Like it was quite a overwhelming kind of dominant display from India in that test. So I think South Africa would this time want to push India a little more and take the game to 4 days and challenge India, especially because they've not really played to their potential in the ODI series, like we were discussing.
Certainly. And let's quickly also take this comment by Akash, which says most South Africans hardly have any experience in Test cricket, said by Laura, probably in the presser. So possibly, we might see some debuts tomorrow. And at large, also in their domestic circuit, they don't have, if not, they don't have any red ball cricket at all. So, Mohit, do you think it's a problem somewhere if CSA can actually take that initiative and come up with a red ball tournament for their women's team? They could see better returns in Test cricket.
Yeah, it's a big problem. And like Akash, and you are rightly saying, there is no red ball cricket at the domestic level. So it's like Laura said in one of the interviews somewhere that it's like memorizing the entire syllabus in one day before the exam, because there's no preparation time that you've had before or experience of doing it. So it's technically not fair on the players. Like, in fact, I think in today's presser, she also said something along the lines of, if we don't have domestic red ball cricket, there's no point playing it internationally because the players will always be undercooked. And it's a fair assessment. Like if you're going to have international matches, you do need to have a domestic tournament. Otherwise, it doesn't serve any purpose. And then, like if the players suffer one-sided losses like they did against Australia, you can't even blame them, because like imagine playing with a red ball for the first time in an international match. That definitely can't be easy, right? Especially in a country like India, where like there'll be a lot of crowd, there'll be very different conditions probably to what they might encounter at home. So it's not easy. So that also again like tilts the scales and makes it a very uneven contest. But currently, like BCCI is again the only board that has a domestic red ball tournament. None of the other boards have it. So that just makes the nature of Test cricket then very one-offish, and it doesn't really benefit anyone. For India, it's great because now there is a domestic tournament. They're playing a set number of tests, so good. But the other teams also need to do something like that if they want to play Test cricket.
Definitely, because although this one-off test has context for some countries because there's a multi-format series, so there's points and things being counted. But others, it just becomes an exercise in futility because not, as you rightly said, players will be undercooked. It will be difficult to actually get any competition. But I think, we've been the biggest advocates for having this domestic red ball tournament. And here in India, we saw a reinstalled version of the senior women's interzonal multi-day trophy. I hope at some point this title becomes slightly smaller, and we have a name to this tournament. And finally, this intent to get back the practice and rigor for Test cricket also, came back with this tournament. So quickly, Mohit, what were your thoughts on this tournament? And again, were you happy to see this out there?
Yeah, very good. Like it was a great tournament because like all the top Indian players more or less played in it,
Featured
barring
it.
a few exceptions. But and it was a hard fought tournament. The final was a very close contest, and like some of the people who did well there have gotten into the Indian team, like Arundhati Reddy. So like the performances there have also been rewarded, which is always good to see. And it was great opportunity for the domestic players also because they got to play with and under the captaincy of people like Harmanpreet Kaur, Skriti Mandana, Sneh Rana, which they otherwise might not get, especially in the red ball format. So it's great. Like, and when these people will now play Test cricket, they will be better prepared, or at least have those 2-3 matches of experience to go by. That too in Indian conditions. So I think the tournament standard was also pretty good because it was just knockouts. So there were no mismatch sides apart from say Northeast Zone who are still very new to cricket, but yeah, all the other teams were quite evenly matched, and you saw that in the contests also.
Yeah, it did make for good viewing, although there was no televising or broadcasting, something we will again, have an entire episode dedicated to. But whatever we could make do from scorecards gave us a good indication that the matches were well contested. And finally, Mohit, my next question was again, going to be ideal playing 11s, but probably that's difficult to say, right? Because we will see new faces probably make their debut, so probably let's not look into the possible playing 11s. But are there any key matchups and battles that you're looking forward to, assuming that these players would be playing?
I think like we can look at India's playing 11 and then there only we can look at the matchups as well. So I think like
Fair
for
enough.
India, they don't really need to change much. Like from the 11 that played against Australia, Yastika Bhatia obviously will not be there because of injury. So I think Shubha Satish can straight away come back because she missed that match because of injury. But after that great debut, I think she's earned that right to bat at number 3. So I think we'll see Smriti opening for sure. I think this management, like the team management, rates Shafali Verma quite highly. So I think they might open with her. Otherwise, there is the option of going in with Priya
Priya?
Punya. But I think India will go with Shafali as the other opener. Then you have Shubhasati Ishit 3, Jemima at 4, Harman at 5, Richa at 6 because she'll be keeping wickets too. So I think like batting at 3 won't really be feasible for her after keeping for so many overs. So I think like she'll be batting at 6, and then you have the 3 all-rounders: Sneh Rana, Deepti Sharma, Pooja Vastakar. So you'll obviously probably have Rajeshwari Gaikwad as well because you will play 3 spinners in India,
Yeah.
and she did fairly well. Like the only place that I think will be closely contested is the second pacer's role because I don't know if Renuka Singh Thakur has the fitness to play a test, and also like with the old ball, how much of an impact she will have. So I wouldn't be surprised if India go in with Arundhati Reddy because she offers a lot more with the bat and in the field, or with even somebody like Meghna Singh who has a lot more pace and can swing the new ball, and obviously that extra pace helps with the old ball as well. So I think that is the only change we might see apart from the forced Yastika Bhatia change. As for matchups, I think if Renuka plays her versus Laura Wolfart is always a very interesting matchup
Yeah.
because she gets good in swing, and that is something that always troubles Laura, especially at the beginning of her innings. Um, I think like the Deepti Sharma Marizan Cup battle will be another one to watch out for. Like it was a good battle in the ODIs as well, and both of them are key players or probably among the most important players for their teams. So that is one battle to watch out for. As for India's batters, like I'm not really sure what South Africa's bowling lineup will be because Marizan's not going to bowl at least on the first day, so that changes the equation. Like they would need to play an extra bowler. But I feel like against Smriti Mandana versus their entire bowling attack is a good matchup, considering they just like couldn't get her out, or even when they created an opportunity, the fielders didn't do their job. So that is a good battle. Like, can they finally get her out early or not? So I think these largely are the main battles to watch out for.
Yeah, definitely. And I can't wait enough, for this test match to start tomorrow, because the last time I saw South Africa in a test was versus Australia. And although, it was not a very memorable one for them, we still saw some fight and competition. And somewhere, I think South Africa would be hurting, from that ODI series. So they'd want to translate all that hurt into a great performance versus India. And I hope it's game on. We get to see a very competitive match. I mean, an India drubbing would also be great, but from a cricketing perspective, I think it would be great if South Africa could put in a valiant fight. And yeah, Mohit, that pretty much does conclude our discussion. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank you for joining me today and sharing all your insights. And to all our viewers, thank you so much for joining in, asking your questions. And hopefully, if you're catching the stream later, also, can add in your thoughts in the comment section. And as you all know, we will be doing live shows like this with cricket fanatics and experts. So make sure to follow Never in the Back Foot on our social media handles and YouTube as well. We have an audio podcast where, again, we've collaborated with Mohit a lot of times on domestic cricket and women's cricket. So make sure to catch up on those episodes if you want your quick fix. And that's all for now. Thank you so much and take care.